One of the best storylines of all time is what we witnessing right now with the Bloodline storyline. Truly have so many layers, so many just crazy moments. But I want to talk about a point in time with this storyline where it felt as if the Bloodline storyline went downhill. But before we could even talk about it being downhill, we have to talk about the peak. The peak to me was when Sami Zayn was in the Bloodline. Sami Zayn in the Bloodline really was just iconic. Truly, it just was amazing. So many crazy moments, like the time where Sami Zayn got his shirt ripped off and they gave him the honorary Uso shirt, like the Bloodline just going to Raw and causing havoc. Just so many crazy moments, and also the dynamics that they had. They had Sami and Solo, which was a great dynamic, and they also had the dynamic of Jimmy and Sami. That was just great when they used to do the handshake and stuff and be cracking jokes. Just great stuff. The Bloodline peak had so many great moments. It had great dynamic between the group, but it also had just unforgettable moments, like when the Bloodline went against Kevin Owens' team at War Games and Sami Zayn just officially cemented his spot in the Bloodline. And then when him and Jay hugged it out and they became cool, stuff like that was just unforgettable. And then the moment where Sami just turned on the Bloodline, he got fed up with Roman stuff and just turned on the Bloodline. All that stuff to me really was the peak of the Bloodline. And some may say that after Sami left, that's when it started to go downhill. I agree, but I don't think it was to the extent of what people make it seem to be. Yes, it wasn't as good as it was when Sami was in the Bloodline, but to me, I still think that it was doing great. So that wasn't the real downhill of the Bloodline storyline. Because after Sami left the group, they still was doing great stuff. You had Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens going against the Usos. You had Solo and the Usos going against Riddle and Sami and Kevin Owens. Stuff like that was just great. And then after that, you had Roman basically getting fed up with the Usos and them losing. So him and Solo decided to go after the tag titles. And Jimmy getting fed up with Roman treating him bad. And that basically just led to Roman pushing Jimmy over the edge, man. Making him get to the point where he's so tired of Roman and his extra craziness, to the point where he ended up hitting Roman, which was an insane moment. And then that led to Jay having to choose between Roman and Jimmy. And of course that led to Jay turning on Roman and basically choosing his brother. So after Sami left, it was still just so many great moments. We can't forget about the Bloodline Civil War. The Bloodline Civil War was insane. Roman getting pinned for the first time in so long just was insane. But after that, that's kind of where it started to lead to the downhill of the Bloodline, in my opinion. I feel like this Bloodline storyline started to go downhill after this, because this is where the build for SummerSlam began. The build for SummerSlam to me was great. So the thing that really was the downhill though was what happened at SummerSlam. You see, the build for SummerSlam was really amazing. They had Solo and Roman basically whooping on Jimmy while Jay was just tied up to the rope, and watching them whoop on his brother. And that's when Jay was trying to go after everything that Roman had, his position in the Bloodline and his title. Jay was trying to come after everything that Roman had. He wanted that spot. And the build was just so good. But then we got to SummerSlam, and this is where the storylines start to go downhill. At SummerSlam, it was tribal combat. Roman versus Jey Uso. And the match itself, it was alright. Nothing crazy to really go back and have to watch. But it was a thing that happened at the end of the match that started the downhill of the Bloodline storyline. And that's when Jimmy made his return and basically caused Jay the match. You see, I say that's the reason for like the downhill of the Bloodline storyline, because that's where the confusion of the storyline really began. Jimmy came back and just turned heel and basically aligned himself with Roman and Solo, he basically went against his brother, and his reason for that was because he didn't want his brother to turn out like Roman, how Roman is crazy and just egotistical and just basically insane. He didn't want his brother to turn out like that, right? But the confusion is, you don't want your brother Jay to be like Roman, but then he aligns himself with Roman. That right there made no sense. Also, the confusing part about it was how Roman and Solo, they took Jimmy out for months or for weeks, whatever it was. They took Jimmy out for a long time. Jimmy came back, and it's like they were cool with Jimmy now, and Jimmy was cool with them. Jimmy, how you cool with them after they just took you out for a long time? You ain't angry with them? You ain't trying to get your revenge after they just did that to you? It really was confusing. So that kind of started the downhill part of the Bloodline storyline. But then, not only that though, but the thing that kind of made it not the best part of the storyline is that Roman really wasn't there as much. So with Roman not being there as much, they couldn't really fully tell the story completely. Yes, they have some moments where they could tell a story without Roman, but with Roman there, it would just make the storyline so much better. So Roman not being there kind of did also affect that part of the storyline. So that right there to me was the moment where the Bloodline storyline kind of started to go downhill. But don't get it twisted, I still think that the Bloodline storyline is good. And in fact, I think that even though that was a downhill moment, I think it's starting to go right back up, because they got The Rock in the Bloodline now. So we get to see a dynamic between The Rock and Roman Reigns. But not just that, but they also going against Cody, they going against Seth, and then you got Jimmy and Solo going against Jay. They be going over to Raw, causing Jay matches and stuff like that. So we starting to see the Bloodline storyline pick back up because of the storylines and stuff that is going on. That right there is very interesting, and it's just so many different ways they could go with all the stuff that's happening. So right now to me it's picking back up. But the time I was talking about, that time where Jimmy turned heel and turned on Jay and Roman kind of wasn't there as often, that point in time, that period of the Bloodline storyline, to me, that's kind of where it went downhill. But that's how I feel. Let me know what y'all think. Do y'all think that right there was a downhill moment for the Bloodline, or I'm just tripping? Y'all let me know in the comments. And also, while you in the comments, comment however else you feeling about this topic. Whether you think it was another point in time where it was a downhill moment for the Bloodline story, whatever it is, make sure y'all leave it in the comments. And don't forget to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button while you down there too, man. And also, check out the description. In the description is my Discord, my TikTok, and my Instagram. All that is in the description. So yeah, check that out. And I hope y'all enjoyed this video. And I'm going to see y'all in the next one. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day, man. Take it easy. Peace.